Unlike some other conspiracy theories, flat eartherism is a bit of a joke. There aren't that many people who believe in it. There is no real reason to believe in it. There is no direct consequence of believing in it. It's mostly something that people make fun of. It's something you hear about online, and maybe you'll even look around and find those weird places where these flat earthers actually exist. But it's not something like anti-vax conspiracy theories, which you are actually confronted with in everyday life. Or so I thought. I recently met a flat earther. An actual flat earther, a person who believes the earth is flat, in real life, by pure coincidence. This was a complete stranger I met while out on a trip riding my bicycle. I didn't look for a flat earther. I didn't seek one out. I didn't go to a flat earther convention. It was just a random stranger met in real life while I was out touching grass. And that was quite an interesting experience, so I wanted to talk about this. Now, I've been interested in flat Earth for a while, for mostly two reasons. One, I'm a bit fascinated when it comes to conspiracy theories anyway. I'm interested in how the people who believe in them think. I'm interested in figuring out why they believe those things. And the second reason is that flat eartherism in particular is interesting to me because there are many, many, many ways to disprove it. There are many ways the earth is a globe. And it's interesting to think about it. It's interesting to think about how many different approaches there are to proving that the earth is in fact not flat. Especially because I myself am a geophysicist, so it's sort of in my wheelhouse. What I do wouldn't work, it wouldn't make sense if the earth were flat. And as such, I've engaged with the topic a bit. I have watched the videos that PhilosophyTube and H-Bomber Guy and of course Dan Olson did on the flat earth. Dan Olson's video in particular is very, very good. But I've not engaged in it deeply. I've not gone looking for those things. I've not sought out the arguments these people have and thought, how could I best debunk them? It's just a thing that you sometimes sort of engage with when online, but usually when people are making fun of flat earthers. So, how did it go when I met an actual flat earther? Well, the first question is, how did I find out they are a flat earther? And the good thing with conspiracy theorists, because of course he didn't just believe in the flat earth, he believed in all the conspiracy theories. The good thing with conspiracy theorists is they will tell you. You don't need to suss it out. You will very, very soon figure out, oh, this person believes some wild shit. And in my case, I got talking. He was an older guy, maybe 60. And we got talking while I was sitting at a bench just on a break during my cycling trip. And he came about from the opposite direction, also sitting down. And we talked a bit. And I told him that I was glad the weather was so nice today because it would be my final tour here, because I'd be moving soon. And yeah, for work. And yeah, what do you do? Well, I do geophysics. So that's not immediately how he got to the flat earth, but it's how he got talking about some topics. of course, he believes many things like your average 5G conspiracy theories, your actually everything is hollowed out and there are tunnels and everything everywhere, and yeah, that's possible with all this crazy technology that they have, these things. And I sort of go along with it. I don't agree with him, but I also don't argue. Here and there I ask a question or make a quick comment, but mostly I let him talk because I know enough about conspiracy theorists to know I won't convince him. It doesn't matter. I could, of course, argue against those points, but why should I? It doesn't serve a purpose. I wouldn't convince him. And there were no other people there. It was just us two talking, so it's not like I needed to prevent someone else from falling for wrong arguments. Didn't matter. He wouldn't convince me, I wouldn't convince him, so I didn't act like I thought he was crazy, which I did. But I sort of went along with it and let him talk because I was interested in hearing what he had to say, not because of the actual contents of it, not because I wanted to be convinced by him, not because I believed anything he said, but because I thought it was interesting, the way he argued, because the first thing that needs to be very clear is this was a smart man. It seems weird, but yes, he was a flat earther, but he was smart. He he was well spoken and his arguments were laid out in a way you would lay them out just as an academic talking about an issue. This wasn't some foaming at the mouth, angry guy who was ranting about some conspiracy theory. No, he was just talking the way you talk about some new interesting technology development with, I don't know, someone, someone you know. Everything he said was insane. Everything he said was complete bullshit. It was completely wrong. But you could still tell from the way he did say it that the reason for that isn't that he was dumb. The reason was that he believed those things. And he lived in his own world of interwoven conspiracy theories where everything had an explanation. And eventually, it got to the flat earth. And I thought to myself, wow, this is incredible. I never think to ever meet an actual flat earther. They actually exist. It's incredible. So, yeah, I started to give some light pushback. So I said that, well, yeah, maybe you're right, and the one thing isn't correct, but just because one thing isn't correct doesn't mean that the other option you present is correct. It's not enough to disprove one thing, you need to prove the other. And well, he thought that was reasonable, and so uh, he talked about different experiments you could do to see that the curvature actually wasn't real and all of that. He was a very nice man, I must say. And I gave some slight pushback because he would talk about, well, when I was on that trip, I saw that weather phenomenon. And at the time, I didn't really think about it. But now, looking back, I realized that that was actually proof of the flat Earth because of X, Y, Z. And if the Earth were actually rotating, the cloud would move in that direction. And I would give some slight pushback, like a bit skeptical, like, oh, wouldn't that still work? Because I wanted to see how he would argue, not because I wanted to convince him. And he had explanations for those things. The explanations didn't work. I could have pushed it. I could have uh, kept on those individual points, but I mean, he wasn't really interested in talking about a single aspect for a long time. He would say in a single sentence something that would take hours of discussion to actually prove and discuss the nuances of what that would mean. No, that was just a given. Oh yeah, well, actually Halloween is satanic and children are killed. Yeah, I mean sure, why not? The the really interesting thing in this, which I noticed, was that he talked about how sometimes when you talk to someone, you realize very quickly that they are so indoctrinated that you can't properly talk with them, and then at that point you just need to say, oh well, no chance, I can't convince them, and just stop. That was something he said, and that was really funny to me. It was really interesting to me, because that's exactly the way I thought about him. I thought, that guy is so far gone, there's no way I will convince him, so why even try? And that is the way he thinks about people like me if I didn't pretend to be someone I wasn't. Like if I were actually saying the things I genuinely thought, he would think about me in a similar way as I think about him. Which isn't to say that means, oh well, we're basically the same, because at the end of the day, he's wrong and I'm not. And yes, I'm confident in that. And I know he would be confident in that as well, but I mean, the proof is is quite obvious. And yeah, I could disprove everything he said. Not in every aspect, but in terms of the flat Earth things, yeah, definitely. I have enough knowledge to talk about these aspects, but you don't disprove a conspiracy theory. These people don't believe in conspiracy theories because they were proven to them. That's not a thing. So there was no point. And yeah, I thought it was quite ironic that there's a bit of symmetry there in how someone who's very far down in a conspiracy theory thinks about people who are completely unwilling to engage with it. Oh, they're so indoctrinated they can't listen to reason. And the way someone who doesn't believe in those things thinks about someone who's very deeply in that conspiracy theory. Because it just shows you that they live in a different world. That's really it. They're not completely different people. As I said, that was a nice and smart man. I enjoyed the conversation with him. I really did. But it's a different reality. There is no basis for actual understanding there. Because the fundamental truth that he believed in and that I believed in are so different that really the only way this conversation could have happened the way it did was by me pretending that I was open to what he had to say. That was the only way for this conversation to not go poorly. And I mean, I didn't mind. I enjoyed the opportunity, because you can of course watch a Dan Olsen video and him explain things. You can observe some people online. You can, I don't know, follow the cybersmith and try to figure out what he believes in and why he believes in it. But at the end of the day, people like the cybersmith, they do exist offline. I just never thought I'd ever meet someone by pure coincidence who believes the earth is flat. And I'm not trying to have a message here like, oh, you need to be nice to people even if they are complete unhinged psychos or something like that. No, that's not what I said. But first of all, that man was harmless. He wasn't some neo-Nazi. And secondly, it wouldn't have changed anything. Like, if I knew that I could have convinced him, I would have tried. I think conspiracy theories are incredibly dangerous. I think they are very destructive. But I knew there was no chance. I mean, this was also not some teenager who believed some weird things. The man was close to retirement, or maybe even already retired. I wouldn't change his mind, not at that point in life. So yeah, I thought I'd rather take the opportunity to see how he looks at the world, and yeah, I'm glad I did. But that doesn't mean that I think you should always try to avoid conflict to the degree that you forsake what you believe in. It's just that at that point, there were no consequences to it. Like, yeah, I basically, I basically pretended that everything I do, my entire work, my entire personality is based on it as well. All of that doesn't matter. Like, all of that isn't true. Uh, but it didn't have consequences. It didn't matter because there were no other people there. I think there's a difference, and that is one point where I must say the talking point that the internet and social media is bad for discourse is somewhat understandable. There is a degree there where I say there was no way I'd ever been nice and understanding to this guy if we hadn't met IRL. If this had happened on Twitter, I would have, yeah, I wouldn't have been nice. I would have tried to debunk what he has to say and call him an idiot, maybe. Not because I'm more unhinged online than IRL, but because there is a difference in something being private and being public. When it's public, I would fear that someone reads that and thinks, oh, that sounds reasonable, because the way he framed those arguments did sound reasonable. That's the thing. If you didn't have any knowledge, you could think that he was being reasonable. It's just that if you know a thing or two, you realize it's not true and you realize why it's not true. Most people would not be convinced. As I said, flat eartherism is a bit of a meme because it's not something the general public will accept. But still, there is a difference there with conspiracy theorists online. As long as they have an audience, some person might read that, and if it sounds reasonable and no one gives them pushback, they might at least be, not if convinced, they might at least think there was something there and maybe they should look into it, and then they look into it the wrong way and find the sources these people use. And at the end of the day, they go down the rabbit hole and, yeah, that they reach a point where they can't be brought back. But offline in one-on-one conversation, it's different. And I must admit, that is quite nice. It is quite nice that, as I said, we live in different worlds, but still we were both people. And that element, that very casual element of, it's at the end of the day, it's a conversation between two people, that gets lost online. And I think it's overblown when people talk about what social media did to discourse and the like, because it's not like offline people are always being civil. Certainly not. But in some situations like here, you can really tell the difference. So I think when trying to understand conspiracy theorists and how they think, it's bad to just do it by observing them online. I think it's helpful to, if that's something you're interested in, with actually speaking them, not debating them, just speaking them with them, talking to them in the real world. This wasn't planned, and I wouldn't have planned it, but I'm glad it happened. So, yeah, that's my experience as a geophysicist meeting a flat earther by pure coincidence.